Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners and a few surprise guests. Today we are speaking with Writers of the Future winner from, which year was it, Scott?
I believe it was 2013.
So from 2013, Scott T. Barnes. Hello, Scott. Welcome.
Hi, John. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. So I got very interested and excited about being able to have you as a guest when I was checking online and just seeing this, your NewMyths anthology and your website and working to help other writers. And, of course, obviously as a past winner, anything that forwards the future for the genre itself, I'm always interested in like that. Plus, you got a very special story that I think will hopefully provide some insight to other aspiring writers on how to deal with various issues that are very real to life and living. So, first of all, as I guess we should just come forward from when you were a winner of Writers of the Future back in 2013. So, how was it then when you won the contest, and then brief overview of coming to current?
Okay, that's a great question, and it covers a lot of ground.
It gives you a lot of latitude just to let her rip.
Yeah, so I was running through my head on the way up here. I live in Orange County. What have I done since the win? And there's been a number of big projects, a number of small ones. I've continue to publish short stories. I have something in Fiction River, which is published by some of the judges here, and various other anthologies. Mm-hmm. On the larger project, a couple of interesting things. The first thing after I finished the contest, we had the award ceremony and all of that, I started working on a nonfiction book with one of the premier swordsmen in the world.
Oh, really?
His name is James Williams, and he studies samurai arts, but he was a professional kickboxer and studied pretty much all of the main martial arts throughout the years. And he also trains special forces, even to this day, even though he's in his 70s.
Wow.
He goes to their various facilities and trains them in weapons combat. So he's just an amazing person, and we decided to write a book together. And that was one of those things which Kevin J. Anderson warned me, be careful being a co-author with someone who's not an author. And but anyway, I did not heed the advice. I went into this project, and we actually finished the book. Got a rough draft, but then he had some personal issues, ended up moving out of California. So this is one of those projects that spent a year of my writing life, which I try to write 2 hours a day, and it's sitting in a drawer.
Oh, no.
So it's a little disappointing. I mean, it's a great project. It's really about samurai philosophy.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's dead, but it's definitely languishing. The second project...
So a lesson learned the hard way.
A lesson learned that I won't do another project with a non-author.
Yeah.
At the same time, I learned a lot, and I studied under James as well. So
yeah, because I've seen pictures of you. You actually practice some of the martial arts.
I do two things, but Nami-Ryu, which is the samurai sword art, and I've been doing that for over 15 years. I have an equivalent to a black belt. It's called Udansha. And I do that, and it may not be the most practical thing because I probably won't get in a sword duel walking down maybe Hollywood Boulevard, but
Possibly
probably nowhere
Hollywood
else. Yeah. But it's still a lot of fun. It fits my personality because it's very meticulous. A quarter of an inch one way or the other is the difference between winning and failing.
Wow.
Whereas if you're in boxing or something, that's a really good hit versus not quite such a good hit, but it's not the end of the fight.
Right.
So it suits me very well.
That's good.
The second project I took on, which was major, I need deadlines. It's hard for me to set deadlines, so I signed up for the Stanford Online Writing Workshop, 2-year program. You're supposed to start with an idea and finish a novel. Now, L. Ron Hubbard would have thought that was an incredible amount of time. He could have produced 20 novels.
Yeah.
But not me. And anyway, I finished a novel, and it was fabulous because I got to work one-on-one with Lauren Kate, who wrote the Fallen series and a number of other series, a big bestseller. And she was great. She guided me through it. a lot of rewrites, and but didn't try to make it, her novel.
Right.
Kept it all related to what I was doing. And when we finished, and I decided I had one more rewrite, I wanted to read it out loud, as I always do for the final rewrite, make the final edits. I realized that my third project needed to get done, and that was an oral history of my dad. I had done one years ago for my grandmother, because we're from a small town in California called Julian, and our family history very much parallels the development of that town. And I just realized my dad's getting older. His health is not perfect. I've got to get this done. My first interview with him was from 1995, if you can believe that.
Wow.
On an old cassette tape.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of interviews, put it together, also interviewed his sister, and that's now done except for the photos. And I've trying to get it published, self-published, of course, because, the audience is the local people, hopefully by Christmas.
Okay.
So those are the three major writing projects that I've been doing besides short stories and of course, my magazine.
Right. So now before you address your magazine, you have a specific thing I think that other people might be able to learn from or to gain from, and that's your special issue, how to deal with family exigencies to proceed with a career as a writer. Can you discuss that, please?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked, and I wanted to talk about that today. Every writer finds it difficult to find writing time. Very few people just are able to write full time, and I set aside 2 hours a day to do it. Thankfully, my job is flexible enough that if I get everything done, I can set my own hours.
Right.
So I would write from 8 to 10 every day.
Is that morning or evening?
Morning.
Okay.
I'm best in the morning.
Right.
And I have a family. I have 2 daughters, age 8 and 10. And unfortunately, back in January, my oldest daughter got a long-term illness. And it was just a regular cold that they don't know for sure, but they think it got into her brain and caused some damage. And we had no idea what was happening. She started by getting very bad tummy aches, and people don't understand what that means, but I mean, it could be an hour of writhing around, screaming, make it stop, make it stop. I mean, it was very difficult. It's difficult to talk about, in fact.
Right.
And no one knew what was happening. And eventually people's, various doctors started saying, well, this is anxiety, essentially saying it's all in her head. And we could tell it wasn't all in her head.
Right.
But I guess anxiety can be pretty bad. And but we're just thinking, how can this be? She's very happy. She says she's happy. We take her to a private school. There's no bullying. We've checked on all of that. Her home life is very good. Anyway, only about 3 weeks ago from this interview, we got a diagnosis of something called POTS. Like, it's easy to remember because it's like you're smoking pot.
Yeah.
And it means postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And what that means is your nervous system is sending the wrong signals to your cardiovascular system. So just think about this. Normally when you stand up or even sit up or anything, the blood should just pool to your feet. It's a liquid. Gravity pulls it down. But
Right.
it doesn't, because your veins and arteries contract and keep it up.
Right.
But with someone who has POTS, the brain doesn't send that signal. And so if everything's working fine, which it does sometimes, it's as if my daughter's completely healthy. But the other times, the blood drains away from her head. She tries to sit up. She gets incredibly dizzy, headaches, nausea. And if she doesn't lie back down very quickly, she can faint. She hasn't fainted yet. She's a moderate case. It's called the severe cases. People faint multiple times per day.
Wow.
So it's a kind of a rare thing, but not all that rare. We were fortunate to find a doctor Well, there were two doctors. We found one at Scripps who was not accepting any new patients. And they said, well, call back in 6 months and we'll put you on the waiting list. How long is that? Well, a year and a half. But my wife is very good and managed to find a doctor who just moved to town, so he didn't have a lot of patients, and got us in there. But it's tough. It's very tough. We got the diagnosis. There's no cure, but generally people's bodies eventually cure themselves in 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
So that's the situation.
Yeah. So then what does this do for you? Maybe it started impinging on you in January when we first started, and then 3 weeks ago with the actual diagnosis. Mm-hmm. How does that affect you then as a writer? Is it more inspirational, or is it more of a distraction, or are you able to channel that? Or
yeah, I think in the long run that it will be. I don't know about inspirational, but all these experiences add to the richness of writing. I mean, I've felt emotions I didn't know I was capable of. So that's certainly true. But in the present, it definitely impinges on things. I mean, I noticed that it was really fortunately, my wife's a stay-at-home mom, so that helped a lot. Mm-hmm. But she's kind of become a caregiver, as my daughter is almost bedridden at this point. It's been getting worse and worse, and I noticed that she was getting very down, and I had to do something about that.
Right. Because
you can't have a depressed wife and a sick child. It's too much. So I ended up saying, I'm going to stay home. You take my youngest daughter, who's 8, to school, and I'll just stay home, and then you do something for yourself and come home at 10:30. So she generally goes and works out. I'm a huge advocate for exercise therapy.
Right. Yeah.
Be happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
Generally, she works out, for an hour. She's only thinking about the pain of her muscles instead of anything else.
Right.
And then it comes back, and sometimes she goes out to breakfast with a friend, whatever she needs, and I'll stay there until she gets back. But that's my writing time, which means my writing time has dwindled to a few minutes here and a few minutes there. But you have to, obviously you have to take care of your children first.
Yeah.
And then you have to take care of yourself. And so I try to do that and not feel too guilty about it. And that's really important. And so I've learned a few lessons about trying to get things done while you have something like this. And let me say that I like theories. I develop theories, and I'm fine when I find out they're wrong, I just come up with a new theory.
Right.
But this has led me to believe just about everyone my age, I'm now 51, is 1 degree away from a major illness. If it's not you, it's someone in your family, or it's your best friend or something. Because once you have one in your family, you start talking to people, and you find out this is not a unique experience.
Right.
So many people, including one of my volunteers at my magazine, share this experience. And so, like, one of the lessons I've learned, which was a hard one for me, is that optimism was my enemy. It's good to retain hope. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I have faith, and I have long-term hope that my daughter's going to be fine, and she's a fighter. She'll make it. Mm-hmm. But this roller coaster of, she's feeling good today. It's good. She's going to be able to go to school. And then, the teacher called. She has to come home from school, and it just crashes. That will kill you. Mm-hmm. You cannot allow your mind to be on a roller coaster. And so I had to kill optimism. I have to be on a straight, even keel. And it's actually made everything a lot easier, even as my daughter's been getting worse lately, because I don't expect anything except for long-term. Long-term, right. I have complete faith that she's going to be better.
Right.
But if she has a bad day, that's what happened today. And that really has been a big lesson. And so finding time, though, is hard. And I think the first thing, if someone is in this situation, is just to consider stopping. Because the first thing you have to do is take care of your family, and then you got to take care of yourself. And it may be too much for your mind to feel guilty about not writing, not getting anything done. But I have to do these other things. I have these more important responsibilities. It may be better just to stop for a year or something and say, okay, I'll pick this up again. But if you can find the time, then I would recommend taking bite-sized projects that you can finish, such as a short story for Writers of the Future, or a short story that you're going to submit, if you've already done Writers of the Future, somewhere else, Analog or Azimuth or my magazine.
Right.
Take on things that you can actually accomplish and feel good about, and not feel guilty that I didn't get my 2 hours of writing in today.
Yeah. What I meant when I said, just to make sure I don't sound like a total cat on this, when I say inspirational, about your daughter being sick, is sometimes a person can realize that there's other people in similar straits that can then, with your story, to help them to deal with theirs, because you've got more strength to deal with things because of your faith, because you do have the wife that you have and your other daughter who's doing quite well. So you're in a situation that perhaps can lend some support to others who maybe don't feel quite as secure in their position with a similar circumstance. That's what I meant by that. So the whole thing on writing short fiction, I know that short fiction, you're talking about 2 years, your project to write the novel, but short stories, one of the things that you do in Writers of the Future is you have that 24-hour story. So, to be able to keep your hand in the craft while dealing with the circumstances, because that's also creativity.
Yeah, I agree completely. I just finished a short story, which I'm going to put in my own anthology, and that was a nice little break for my mind. Because this sort of thing takes a large bandwidth out of your mind.
That I totally believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was being optimistic and then having the crashes, I found it was hard to remember things. It was hard to do fairly simple math because such a big part of my brain was occupied with this worry. But I've been able to manage that a lot better, and doing that short story for a couple of weeks. I just spent 2 weeks on it because I've learned to be a lot faster. Was a great mental break from everything else, and it was nice. Yeah,
I mentioned earlier before this interview with one of our winners last year, Wolf Moon. His story about that girl, the Super Duper Moon Girl, about a girl who was disabled from terrorist attack in her school, and then she's now living on the moon with an AI dog that helps her give breathing support. He himself also has long-term physical issues, and that was a story he wrote literally in 24 hours. The last day of the contest, the last day of the last quarter,
Wow.
And submitted it. And but that was from the heart. That was a real communication from him. And so a lot of other people have been able to relate to that because of their own issues with having personal disabilities as well. So that's why I was really excited to be able to talk to you about this, because of other people that are having to deal with, like you said, you're 1 degree away.
Absolutely.
So it's important that someone else get this and know that, okay, 1, you're not alone, but 2, it is possible to go ahead and survive and lead a good life while dealing with, your issues.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
I heard that podcast. That's a very good one.
Yeah.
And I have not read his story, but I plan to.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you mentioned inspiration, and I did not take that poorly at all. That's absolutely true. Someday a story will come to me because of this 100%.
Yeah.
And it'll be richer than anything I could have written before. And it probably won't be about pots, because that's the way the imagination works.
Sure.
It mixes 3 or 4 different things, and you come up with a curse or something like that. But it's going to be because of this experience for sure.
Yeah. So now you mentioned your online, your website. You've got stories that you said will be something in your magazine. So let's talk now about your New Myths anthology and your website and more about that, because you've created this whole other world of stories for other authors to contribute, as well as what you're able to do yourself. And I've seen some of our past winners in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've used, I have purchased stories from past winners and also artwork from some of your graduates. Fiona Yang.
Yeah.
I hope I'm saying her last name right. I call her Fiona because we've become friends.
Yeah.
I think we're going to use her in March of next year. Anyway, we're definitely going to buy her latest artwork if she's willing to sell it to us.
Yeah.
Any case, so yeah, if you don't mind, I have 3 different kind of websites.
Sure.
Projects. ScottTBarnes.com, so it's my name, Scott, and with an extra T, and then Barnes, BARNES.com. That's where I list what I'm working on and my own projects.
Right.
The next would be NewMyths Publishing, NEWMYTHS, publishing.com, which is things like this anthology and everything except the magazine that's coming out, including some other people's work. And then my magazine, NewMyths.com, which I've been doing for over 10 years. It's a semi-pro magazine, which just means we pay a little less than Analog or Asimov's or something. Right. It's online, and we publish 4 times a year. And thankfully, as you can probably tell, I try to do too many things. But I have a couple of volunteers, although I pay one of them something, that help with the magazine. Mm-hmm. Martha Tarankulu, and especially Susan Shell Winston, who really is at the helm at the moment.
Right.
So we publish quarterly.
What kind of stories do you publish?
Yeah. So I publish things that I like, and I have an eclectic.
That works.
I have an eclectic taste. I don't know if it's the best for large scale circulation, but I try to have some fantasy, some science fiction, some science fantasy, some hard science fiction, some high fantasy.
It's all in a speculative fiction.
It's all speculative fiction.
Yeah.
That's the main requirement, and I like to keep it PG or
sure.
less.
We share that reality with Rise of the Future as well.
Yeah. And so it's family friendly. And I publish about 6 long fiction, 3 or 4 flash fiction, even some nonfiction if it's related to speculative writing, and poetry. We actually are one of the top markets for speculative poetry in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's because I pay a flat fee, and most people pay by the word.
Oh.
And it turns out it's a lot per word if you just pay a flat fee.
Yeah.
And I love it. I have some of the best poets who've won all kinds of awards submitting to the magazine. So that's very fun.
Well, that's great. So if somebody then wants to submit to New Myths, what do they do? How does one go about that?
So go to newmyths.com. It's our website, and there's a submission form. It's supposed to be automated, and it's sometimes working and sometimes doesn't. I have a really good tech person who has too much in common with me. He also has taken on too many projects.
Yeah.
So when it doesn't work, you can email the submissions. There are 2 reading periods. Mm-hmm. I think it's January 1 to the end of February and June 1 to the end of July. I used to read all year. It was just too much.
Yeah.
And so it has to be in those periods. And we get a lot of submissions. I have forgotten the figure, but it's not like Rise of the Future, but it may be something like 1,000 for everyone we actually take. It's a big number. But if you write well, you will eventually get in, and you pay a penny and a half a word.
Well, all right. So now how's a person, is it a subscription base or is it like one-off, you go to it and just have to download each time it comes out, or how does that work? How does the person actually get it to read it?
Right now, you just read it online, and you can certainly read it on your phone. It's, I forget what you call it, but it's, do you say optimized for phone reading and so forth? Yeah. So people just come and they read it. And
do you have to pay for it?
It's free. It's
wow,
free,
that's awesome.
It's it's been a money pit, frankly. Although we recently came out with an anthology, and we did a Kickstarter, which was very successful. In fact, we surpassed our goal by about double, and decided to do an audio version with the extra proceeds.
Oh, that's good. So that's this one here in front of me, Passages?
Yeah, so I brought this along, and it's on our 10-year anniversary. We wanted to do something special, so we decided to publish an anthology, best of. Plus, we included some new fiction. So we had people submit specifically for the theme of the anthology, which is passages from one stage in life to another.
Uh-huh.
So the 4 various stages in life, including on into old age and beyond. And
so just flipping through, I just know there's a story here called "You Can Catch Almost Anything," a cantrip. By this guy named Scott T. Barnes. What's that story about?
Believe it or not, it's the first story I ever put in my own magazine. I have always reserved it for other people's writings, probably in the beginning because I wasn't confident enough that I'd earned my place there.
Right.
But I think I'm going to do more now because I've sold enough that I feel good about just putting it in and not, that's okay for me to do now.
For sure.
But that's a coming of age story, and I'm quite proud of it. It came out very well. It's set in India, or at least a fictional India, and I love exploring new cultures, new things, and trying to do stories that are unique in some way. That I think it's kind of impossible to be completely unique. If it was, no one would read it because it would be so bizarre.
Yeah.
But something that I've never seen before, and this story set in India, which it's somewhat humorous. If you have ever been snipe hunting, or you know what that is,
sure.
It's a fantasy take on the old snipe hunt, and I think it came out quite well.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's a fun concept. There's so many different variations on that theme.
Yeah,
definitely. So, on
those lines, we have 2 more anthologies scheduled to come out, and after that we're going to evaluate. And the next one is Twilight Worlds, and we're almost done editing it. Not sure if it will come out this year. That was the plan, but because of what we discussed earlier, I don't have enough time. We may have to push it back till first quarter next year. But it's about kind of the end of a world or the beginning of a new world, and stories along that theme. I think it's going to be really good.
So it's, again, that's speculative fiction, or is it mostly Christian fic, or how's that?
It's all speculative fiction. I don't specifically write or solicit Christian fiction. I'm happy to get it.
Yeah.
But no, it's anyone's welcome to put in their stories. Yeah.
I get it. So if someone wants to get Passages, how would you find it? How would you be able to get it?
It's available on Amazon and should be on the other platforms as well.
Oh, good. Or on your website, they can go there, and or is it linked to Amazon?
I think it just links to Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's called Passages by Scott T. Barnes.
That will definitely pull it up for you.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So on, so we've talked. You said so. We got your personal website, scotttbarnes.com.
Right.
Then there's NewMyths.com, which is the website where you can get this book, but you can also read all the stories in here. How does that work, Scott? The New Myths.
So the New Myths website is the magazine.
That's the magazine. It has that's different stories.
Well, it's true that probably 2/3 of these stories, if you went out and sought them out, are available for free on the website. you'd have to go through the past issues and do a lot of
10
clicks.
years worth of, yeah.
Yeah. But if you wanted to go through the trouble of that and not buy the anthology, you can do it.
I wasn't implying that. I was just wasn't sure if this is a different set of stories or the best of that plus other best.
It was the best of that. Again, what we did with Susan Shell Winston and Martha Tarancula, we went through all of the old stories, and we just selected what we thought were the best, and then looked for a theme. Mm-hmm. And we ended up coming up with three themes, the first one being passages, the second one being Twilight Worlds, and the third one I don't want to mention because I don't remember the exact catchy name we came up with. But that's why I'm sure they're going to be 3 of these, but after that we'll just have to see.
Yeah, but the first one right now is passages that people can find and can read.
Correct.
And sets you up for Volume 2 because this says Best of New Myths Anthology Volume 1.
Right, yeah.
Good. Now, do you have any social presence, social media, that somebody can find you or your New Myths?
I don't do nearly enough. In fact, the New Myths one is completely languishing. I do have a Facebook page, and I think it's just Scott T. Barnes. It's not a specific author page. It has everything, but I will definitely accept your friend requests if you go on there.
Okay, good. So the main way to find you and your work is with the NewMythsAnthology.com or scotttbarnes.com.
That's right.
That's where you prefer to be found. And so if somebody wants to reach you or reach out to you, then
they can definitely email me through that.
Okay.
admin@newmyths.com is a good email.
Okay. So in terms of just communicating then to other aspiring writers, since as a winner of Writers of the Future, you had your curve that got you up to being a winner, and then as your writing life has proceeded, as we've discussed this last half hour, any other tips or advice that you could give to aspiring writers?
Yeah. So depending on where you are, but if you are just starting out, no question, Writers of the Future, if you're in speculative fiction, is the best thing you can try to win. Mm-hmm. And what I did, once I decided, I'd heard about it and talked to some people just to verify it was legit.
Yeah.
Which I recommend, do that.
Mm-hmm.
I submitted almost every quarter for 3 years. And it's great because, as I said, I do better with fixed deadlines.
Yeah.
And
Kevin Anderson was the same way.
Was he?
Yeah.
Well, he must have a clock for his deadline now because he produces a lot.
A lot.
And it worked for me. I was finishing a good short story every quarter. I ended up getting an honorable mention for one, which honestly was almost as important as the win. Because when I got the win, I didn't feel it was a fluke. Mm-hmm. I felt like, I almost made it before, so I have some talent. This is not a one-off. So that was really important to me.
Yeah, 2 other people, too, that I've talked to, Joe Hill was an honorable mention, and Brandon Sanderson. And they both said it made a big difference for them in their careers to help, you're on the right path. So it totally makes sense because I've heard it from others as well, saying the importance of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great path. If you don't mind, I can do a shout out to the Odyssey Fantasy Writing Workshop.
For sure.
That's a 6-week residency in New Hampshire. I did that before Writers of the Future. That's kind of where I asked about Writers of the Future, if it was legit and so forth. And the teacher there is great. Jean Cavalos has been a publisher. She was an astrophysicist. She's written fiction and nonfiction. And that'll really kickstart your abilities.
Right.
Writers of the Future, if you win, they're going to kickstart your career. But they assume if you've won, you're a pretty good writer already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And that's what the judges will say, because now we have the 3 judges that do the primary workshop. We got Orson Scott Card, Tim Powers, and Dave Wolverton. Now he writes as Dave Farland.
Right.
And they say, we assume that you're a writer. Now we're going to give you the fine tune as a writer and introduction to the industry.
And, I run into those 3 people at conferences now and then. And, they remember me. They're friendly. it's kind of a big family almost.
Yeah.
And the follow-up that we get, this podcast and other things is so much more than I've seen anywhere else.
Yeah. It's important. I mean, it's part of the legacy of L. Ron Hubbard that to create this, he continues to fund it, long since his passing, but he put it in his will to make sure that this contest go on because he saw the importance of specifically science fiction because it's the future. People writing about and postulating a future that is hopefully better than the past or the present, that humanity will survive and will survive better. And science fiction does provide a lot of that inspiration. I don't know, when you had your awards ceremony, who was the keynote speaker? Do you remember?
I don't remember the keynote speaker. I know Dave Wolverton actually handed me my award.
Uh-huh. But each year we try to have either an astrophysicist, an astronaut, somebody who was inspired by science fiction to give them a direction that they wanted to go for in life, and that's a key part of what this is all about. And that's why a lot of the different essays also that are studied in the workshop, we've recently had. We're creating an online writing course for Writers of the Future right now for aspiring writers, and we just recently had Tim Powers and Dave Farland here to record interviews talking about it, and we talked about the essays that they teach in the class that were written by L. Ron Hubbard back in the 40s. And they're saying that they're just as applicable now as they were back then because they're just basic truths about creative writing, how to write, and how to make a living as an author. I don't know do you remember any of the different essays that you studied at all?
I agree completely. And in fact, I ended up buying the entire selection of Writers of the Future anthologies and reread Volume 1 because I had read that when it first came out.
Wow.
And then Volume 2, and there's a couple of essays in there. And I agree completely. They are as applicable today as whenever they were first written. Yeah.
Way back when, yes.
Very much so. And I think especially, L. Ron Hubbard was what Dean Wesley Smith would call a high production writer.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of words fast. And if you intend to do that and to be a professional writer rather than I have one story I ever want to tell, then it's just gold.
Yeah.
It's just gold, yeah.
Yeah, Dean definitely talks about that. And there's a few different writers that, Kevin Anderson too, when he was, because he novelized one of L. Ron Hubbard's screenplays, I Pedrito. He talked about trying to meet that production output that he does because a lot of stuff he sold 92% first draft, first submission that he submitted,
Yeah.
But he was, but he wrote millions of words. And so he said, throw away your first million words, so he built up his style. So he was able to do there and just see, and he composed as he was writing the whole thing. When we proofread some of his stories from the Golden Age books that we republished from his Pulp Fiction stories from the 30s and 40s, I'm proofreading it. Sometimes I get to a page and go like, wait, I just finished reading this, but it just stops and it goes back a page. What he would do is because that was before the days of having a computer where he could then just erase and go back and reformat.
Right.
So he'd just put another piece of paper and go back a half a page or so and pick up the action from right there and then type through and make his edit that way. And,
like redrafting, again, as Chris Rush and Dean Wesley Smith recommend, rather than revising. Yeah. They recommend you kind of start over and redraft.
Yeah, and so that's what he did. And so that's, one of the little anecdotal, they were the first Writers of the Future romance. They met at the first workshop. That's how Dean and Chris met.
Oh, I had no idea.
In Taos, New Mexico, the first Writers of the Future workshop. Wow. That's where they met. And so he was the very first person to be awarded for Writers of the Future, the first person to get their award way back in Volume 1. Anyway, there's Writers of the Future nostalgia. So anything else that you can say for, or any other thoughts or comments for aspiring writers? I know some people like to procrastinate and never submit the story, or it's not good enough, or the self-doubt, or various things. Any comments about that? That's
a big one.
Yeah.
I I think let me touch on the redrafting, revising thing.
Okay, good.
Because we brought it up. I think that it's important to move on. You write your story as well as you can now, understanding that a year from now you might look back and think that's kind of shoddy. Yeah, but this is where you are now, and you do your best, and then you have to understand when it's time to move on.
Right.
Instead of revising, and people say, "Well, when do I know when to stop revising?" And I think it's when you're just tinkering. When you're just tinkering about, I'm going to move this word here, and I'm going to move this here, and maybe this sentence would sound better down here. Not that you shouldn't do some of that, but when you realize that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm spending hours and hours and hours doing nothing but that, it's time to put it down and start your next one. And your next one will be better. You learn more by writing new than you do by tinkering with your current project.
So just submit what you write and then get going again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't advocate just one draft and send it in because I'm not good enough to do that. But I advocate aspiring to that.
Right.
Every writer should have the goal that their first draft is near perfect and you're going to send it in. Because if that's your goal, you're going to start writing better and faster and spending less time tinkering around. And you may never get there, but that's a worthy goal that'll set you on the right path for your whole career.
Wow. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and that's good. And hopefully anybody listening to this thing here is going to have gotten, we've covered so many topics here, way more than what I thought I was going to be able to gain from this interview with you. So any other last little things you'd like to say before we end off this interview?
You know what? I used to interview for jobs before I got now I work for essentially my own company. And that was my most hated question on every job interview. I never know what to say. So okay. I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, well, good. So people know how to find you. They know how to find your book. They know why they should read it. And hopefully they've been inspired by some of the things we talked about. So thank you very much, Scott.
I really appreciate it, John. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy.